I still remember the exact moment I realized something was deeply wrong in my family, but back then the signs felt small enough to ignore. It was a Saturday morning, sun starting to warm the kitchen window, and my mom asked me, again, to keep an eye on Dad's mood, like I was some kind of emotional babysitter instead of their 27-year-old son just trying to drink his coffee. That was the first flicker, the quiet tug in my chest that said, this isn't normal, even if I'd spent years convincing myself it was. Most days, my life looked predictable from the outside. I worked early shifts at the local grocery store, came home tired, and tried to keep the peace between two people who couldn't go a whole day without making each other miserable. My mom nitpicked everything: how Dad ate, how he walked, how he folded towels, while Dad acted like every question was an interrogation. And somehow I was the buffer. I wasn't even living with them full-time anymore, just stopping by to help out because Mom insisted she needed me around. It always came off like love, but lately it felt like a leash. At first, the tension at home was subtle. Mom would sigh dramatically whenever Dad spoke, then whisper to me that he didn't appreciate anything she did. Dad, meanwhile, pulled me aside to complain that she was always keeping score and turning everything into a competition. I tried brushing it off, assuming it was just another rough patch after 30 years of marriage. But the longer I stayed, the more they treated me like a referee instead of a son. What really got under my skin was how they both started using my presence as leverage. If Mom cooked something new, she'd loudly ask me what I thought, before Dad even picked up his fork. If Dad fixed something in the house, he'd call me into the room to check out the craftsmanship, making sure Mom overheard. It was weird, petty, and honestly exhausting. I'd leave their house feeling drained, like I had just worked a double shift without the paycheck. The disrespect toward each other slowly started bleeding onto me. Mom would blame me when Dad didn't listen to her, saying I never backed her up. Dad accused me of taking sides if I didn't agree with his version of events. They weren't yelling or throwing things. They weren't dramatic like that, but it was a steady grind, a constant pressure to fix something I didn't break. I tried setting boundaries. I told them I didn't want to be in the middle, that I just wanted to help around the house and keep things running smoothly. Mom nodded and said she understood, but the next day she cornered me with a stack of unpaid bills and whispered that Dad didn't care if the lights got shut off. Dad rolled his eyes when I mentioned it and muttered that Mom liked playing the victim. And there I was again, trapped in the middle like a human tug-of-war rope. One night things shifted from uncomfortable to concerning. I came over to drop off groceries and heard them arguing in the living room. Not yelling, but low and sharp, like two people trying to hide knives behind their backs. When they noticed me, they instantly shut up, both pretending they were just talking. That silent tension hit me harder than any shouting match would have. It felt coordinated, secretive. Then the smaller things started stacking up. Mom asking if I had extra money to spare because Dad forgot to cover something. Dad quietly slipping me cash to give back to her because she'd twisted into some big drama if I handed it over directly. It didn't make sense. They weren't broke, and they weren't usually this disorganized. Something was off, but neither would tell me what. The final straw of part one came one afternoon when I found a letter on their dining table, unopened, addressed to Mom. When I picked it up to move it aside, Mom practically sprinted across the room to snatch it from me. Her face went pale and she muttered something about private matters before disappearing into the bedroom. Dad watched the whole thing from the hallway, eyes narrowed like he already knew what it contained. That was when the tension stopped being background noise and became a warning bell I could no longer ignore. Something was happening behind the scenes, something they were both desperate to hide, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I could trust either of them. A few days after the letter incident, the atmosphere in their house shifted from tense to brittle. Every time I visited, Mom hovered like she was guarding something, and Dad watched her like he was waiting for her to slip. It wasn't normal marital stress anymore. It felt like sitting between two people holding secrets like grenades. I didn't want to pry, but they made it impossible not to. Mom was suddenly asking me to pick up odd things: stamps, envelopes, copies of documents, without explaining why. Dad, meanwhile, kept bringing up retirement plans he'd never mentioned before, talking like Mom was trying to derail them. The whole thing started to feel like I had wandered into the middle of a slow-motion disaster I didn't sign up for. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday evening. I stopped by to help change the living room light fixture, and when I walked in, Mom was sitting frozen on the couch with a stack of papers in her lap. Dad stood in front of her, arms crossed. Neither said a word, but the air felt heavy enough to choke on. Mom looked at me with this strange mix of fear and guilt. "Your father," she said quietly, "thinks I've been taking money from him." Dad didn't look away from her. "Don't act like it's some wild accusation," he said. "I've been noticing withdrawals for months." Mom's hands trembled. "Because I've been covering bills you keep ignoring." They went back and forth, both insisting they were the responsible one, both claiming the other was lying. I tried staying out of it, but then Mom suddenly thrust the stack of papers toward me. "Read it," she said. "Then tell him who's actually been irresponsible." I didn't want to get involved, but she wouldn't let me refuse. When I took the papers, my heart dropped. They weren't bills. They were bank statements, multiple accounts, withdrawals, deposits, transfers, and one account I had never seen before, a separate savings account under my mom's name with nearly $8,000 moved into it over the past year. My mouth went dry. "Mom, what is this?" She pressed her lips together. "Insurance, in case things got worse." Dad scoffed. "Insurance? You've been siphoning money behind my back." Mom fired back. "You would have wasted it. You always do." I felt my stomach twist. They weren't asking me to mediate. They were dragging me in as a witness, as proof, as a pawn. But it didn't stop there. That same night when Mom went to take a walk, Dad pulled me aside. He lowered his voice like he was telling me state secrets. "She's lying," he said. "I think she's planning to leave. Maybe take the house. Maybe take half of my pension. I need you to keep an eye on her for me." It hit me like a slap. Both of them wanted me to spy. Both wanted me to pick a side. Both were using me as a tool to get leverage over the other. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just tension. It was manipulation. They weren't trying to save their marriage. They were trying to win some twisted internal war, and I was stuck in the middle with no idea how deep it went. Over the next week, things snowballed. Mom kept hinting that Dad was hiding things too. Mail she never saw, cash he didn't account for, errands that didn't line up. Dad insisted she was paranoid and trying to make him look unstable. Every conversation turned into a subtle interrogation. They even started asking questions about my life as if fishing for weaknesses they could use. Mom wondered aloud if I regretted moving out, while Dad asked whether I felt Mom pressured me too much growing up. It was like watching two people peel back the layers of my childhood looking for ammunition. What finally pushed me over the edge was when I came home one night to find a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was shaky. "If anyone asks," she said, "I was with you this afternoon. Your father's trying to twist everything. Please, I need you on my side." I stared at my phone, stunned. She wanted an alibi for something she wouldn't even explain. And an hour later, Dad texted me, "Call me. Your mom's hiding more than you think. I need your help." That was it. The moment everything snapped. I wasn't going to be their pawn anymore. I wasn't going to be their hostage. I was done letting two grown adults treat me like a bargaining chip. If they wanted to drag me into their quiet little war, fine. But I wasn't going in blind. I was going to find out the truth myself. And then I was going to make sure neither of them ever used me like that again. Once I decided I wasn't playing mediator anymore, my entire approach shifted. Instead of reacting to whatever they threw at me, I started paying attention. Quietly, carefully, like someone finally turning on the lights in a room full of clutter. If Mom and Dad were both hiding things, then the only way to protect myself was to get the full picture before either of them tried to pull me deeper. The first thing I did was stop taking their calls unless it was absolutely necessary. That alone made them suspicious. Mom left long, rambling messages about how communication is important, and Dad started texting short, clipped questions like he was checking whether I had flipped sides. But I didn't give them anything. I kept my tone neutral, my answers vague, and my visits short. The second thing I did was gather my own evidence, not for court or anything dramatic, but for clarity. I dug through the old file box in their hallway closet, the one stuffed with years of tax returns, warranties, and appliance manuals. I pretended I was looking for an old receipt Mom had once accused me of losing. In reality, I was scanning for anything that didn't match what they'd been telling me. That's when I found it. Not a smoking gun, but the first real clue. 2 years of bank statements for Dad's account showed regular cash withdrawals that didn't match any household expenses. Not massive amounts, but consistent, predictable, controlled. Yet he'd been accusing Mom of bleeding him dry. I took photos with my phone and put everything back exactly how I found it. A few days later, Mom gave me the perfect excuse to check her end of things. She asked me to help fix the loose drawer in her bedroom dresser. While I tightened the screws, she walked out to take a call, leaving the top drawer slightly open. And that's where I saw the envelope. The same type as the mysterious letter I'd briefly touched that day in the dining room. Inside were printouts, account summaries, transaction histories, and what looked like a note from a financial counselor. It wasn't a secret getaway fund or anything dramatic. It was planning paperwork. Someone had been helping her prepare an individual financial strategy. The dates lined up with Dad's strange cash withdrawals. It was dawning on me. Both of them had been preparing for some kind of separation, quietly, independently, and using me as the emotional middleman without admitting what was actually happening. And neither of them thought to treat me like an adult who deserved honesty. Once I understood the shape of the truth, the revenge came to me naturally. Not spiteful, not destructive, just corrective. A boundary they couldn't ignore. I started by telling each of them a small, friendly lie. To Mom, I'm working longer shifts these weeks, so I won't be stopping by as often. To Dad, I picked up extra hours, can't check in as much. Both nodded, but their eyes darted, calculating what that meant for their little proxy war. With me gone, they had no buffer, no witness, no leverage. That was step one. Step two came when I stopped being their messenger entirely. Anytime Mom asked me to pass something along or remind your father, I simply said, "You should talk to him directly." Same with Dad, every single time. I didn't budge. Step three was the quietest and the most effective. I printed the photos of Dad's withdrawals, the summaries of Mom's separate financial planning, and tucked them into two matching envelopes. No explanations, no accusations. I left one on Mom's kitchen counter when she stepped away to get a pot from the pantry. I left the other on Dad's car seat while he was in the hardware store. Each envelope contained only one sentence on top. Talk to each other, leave me out of it. I didn't wait for blowback. I didn't wait for their reactions. I didn't even pick up when they started calling within the hour. I let their phones ring while I ate dinner at home with the TV on low, feeling calmer than I had in months. They wanted me in the middle, but now they had no choice except to deal with each other for real, for the first time in years. And I knew the fallout was coming, but for once it wouldn't land on me. The fallout landed fast, quicker than I expected, honestly. The morning after I dropped the envelopes, I woke up to 6 missed calls from Mom and 3 from Dad. No voicemails, no texts, just silence wrapped in panic. It was the kind of quiet that tells you two people finally ran into a wall they could no longer ignore. I didn't call back. I went to work, stocked produce, swept aisles, and pretended my phone wasn't vibrating in my pocket all day. By the time my shift ended, the barrage had slowed to a trickle. When I finally checked my notifications, there was just one message left. Mom asking if I could come over to talk. I didn't answer. That evening, both of them showed up at my apartment unannounced. They weren't yelling, but the tension between them was sharp enough to feel from the hallway when I opened the door. Mom's eyes were red from crying. Dad's jaw was tight like he'd been clenching it for hours. They stood there side by side, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. Dad spoke first. "We saw what you left." Mom swallowed hard. "You were right. We've been dragging you into things you shouldn't have been part of." I didn't say anything. I stepped aside, letting them in. They sat on my couch like two kids waiting for the principal. And for the first time, they actually talked, to me and to each other, without using me as a shield. They admitted they'd both been planning for a separation, but were too afraid to say it, too ashamed to admit their marriage had worn thin in places they'd been ignoring for years. Instead of facing each other, they turned me into a pressure valve, dumping their fear and resentment on me, because it was easier than confronting the truth. Mom apologized first. soft, sincere. She said she never realized how much she leaned on me until she saw everything laid out on paper. Dad followed, more awkward but honest, admitting he'd been keeping secrets out of stubborn pride. Then Dad asked the one question I had been waiting for. "What do you want from us now?" I took a long breath. I want out of the middle. Completely. No more updates about each other. No more messages passed through me. No more guilt trips. If you two have issues, you handle them directly. Not through me. They both nodded, and for once it didn't feel like they were agreeing just to get the conversation over with. They actually listened. Over the next month, they made real changes. They met with a counselor, not for reconciliation, but for guidance on a calm separation. They divided responsibilities without dragging me in. They argued, sure, but they left me out of it. Slowly, the emotional fog around them lifted. They weren't fixed, but they were finally facing their problems themselves. My revenge wasn't flashy. It didn't ruin anyone's life. It didn't blow up the family in some dramatic storybook way. But it worked. By gathering proof, refusing to be their pawn, and forcing them to confront each other instead of using me, I took back the one thing they'd quietly taken from me over the years: my peace. Now, whenever I visit their separate places, Mom's small rental, Dad's quiet duplex, they talk to me like an adult, not a mediator. They ask about my life instead of dumping their chaos on me. It's almost strange seeing them behave like two people who finally understand boundaries. The moral of all this? Sometimes revenge isn't about payback. Sometimes it's about stepping out of the crossfire and letting people sit in the mess they created. Letting them finally deal with each other without dragging you through every emotional crack. And honestly, for the first time in a long time, my life finally feels like my own.